Okay, so I'm going to talk all about portion control and how it can be effective for your weight loss and your weight maintenance. So let's get into it. All right, so what is portion control? Besides the obvious, it's managing what the portion is that you put on your plate. Uh, it's really just making a conscious effort to watch what you're adding to your plate. Now, there's a little bit of a difference between your portion size and a serving size. A portion size is what you're choosing to eat. Serving size is just what's on a food label that tells you what a recommended serving size is. You don't always have to follow the guidelines of what a serving size is for something, but it's helpful because you know exactly what you're having. With portion control, it's not depriving you from things. It's just you're being more mindful about the portion of what you're having. Obviously, benefits with portion control is you can manage your calories a little bit better. It's going to help you prevent overeating because you are consciously looking at the portion that you're having. Also, it's going to help improve digestion because if you're not having a ton of something, your body doesn't have to work as hard to break it down. So instead of having these huge plates and just mindlessly eating till you're full and then you have a hard time digesting all of that, you're having specific amounts of food that are decent size, not overdoing it. And it's going to be easier on your digestion and you're not going to have that like crash after you eat. Because eating those smaller meals and kind of frequently throughout the day is going to lead to better energy levels. We're not going to have this spike of blood sugar and then crashing later and you feel exhausted and you need to take a nap. No. If you're doing good portions of everything, you should have pretty consistent energy levels throughout your day. Okay, so some easy ways that you can start to incorporate portion control. I think I went past it. Is just using a smaller plate. It is actually pretty crazy. The dinner plate size has increased almost 23%, I think they were saying, since the 1900s. It's gone from being basically like a salad plate size to, which was around like 9 inches, to almost 12 inches. And some restaurants even have 13-inch plates. So maybe what people were doing in the past on their smaller size plates looked pretty good for portions. But when you go to that bigger size plate and you're filling it the same exact way as the smaller plate, you're going to be consuming a lot more calories. So just getting yourself a smaller plate and kind of filling that plate is already going to cut down on your calories, unless you have like a plate stacked up super high. We're going to talk about like actual, like, you know, eyeing your portion and saying, okay, that's good on my plate. I'll show you some pictures of how you can structure your plate. Um, but use smaller bowls, maybe even if you have a meal that is, appropriate to use chopsticks. I've done that before, and that really helped me to slow down because, you can't eat that fast with chopsticks. But having that smaller plate or a smaller bowl, or instead of putting your cereal in a bowl, put it in a cup, like a coffee cup or something, that's it's going to kind of trick your brain. Because on that smaller plate or that smaller bowl, if that's really full looking, you're going to feel like you're getting a lot, even though it's a smaller portion. Just like you can see it on the plate and it looks like it's full. So you're like, okay, I'm getting a decent amount. It's a little trick of the mind. Um, but it has been proven that, like, if you do have a larger plate and that is pretty full, that people are more likely to consume a larger amount of food on that plate because they feel like they need to. We had this like thing trained in your brain, like clean plate club, finish your plate. If you have a humongous plate, it's not a good idea to be finishing your plate because that's just way too much. Smaller plates, more like a salad plate size, is good for your dinner. Another thing that can be helpful for portion control is getting pre-portioned snacks instead of eating directly from the bag, or consciously taking a snack out and portioning it before you start consuming it. It's much easier to already have them done so that when you go to grab something, it's like ready to go and you're not gonna just start eating from the big bag of something. It's just way too easy to overeat when it's in a big bag like that. And like I said, we want to avoid eating straight from the package. Take your, like, say you wanted some chips. Perfectly fine. Just watch your portion. I would take the bag of chips out. I'd put a bowl or a cup or whatever on a food scale, hit the 0 button, and put in a portion of what I wanted. And then that's it. And then that's what you have. Weighing and measuring your foods is going to be very helpful in portion control because it's so easy to go over on things, especially cereals, different grains, pastas, and nuts. People go crazy with nuts. Portioning it out is going to really help you control your calories. And it is very easy for us to kind of lie to ourselves and say, yeah, that's this handful of nuts is barely anything. But if you were to actually go and put it on the scale and then look at how many calories it actually is, then your mind's like, oh, okay, maybe I've been doing it way too much. Maybe I've actually been having more like 3 times the portion that I should be having. So just being more mindful and paying a little closer attention. Don't eat out of the bag directly. It's so simple to just throw your portion on the scale and take it and you're good to go. But you don't want to just mindlessly eat out of the bag or dump, your cereal into a big bowl. We want to be measuring these things out. And if you don't have a food scale, measuring cups are good too, but the food scale is just so much more accurate. And I think it's easier because you can just have what you want. Like you have your bowl on the scale, zero it, put what you want, and then take your bowl away and go. It's really not that difficult. Things that you definitely want to be mindful are things that are high in fat, like those nuts. Higher in fat, they're going to be higher in calories. That's just how fat is. It's higher calorie per gram. So you just have to be careful. I would be consciously measuring out those kind of things. Your salad dressings, eyeing that. Let's stop doing that. Measure it out, at least while you get going. Eventually, you get pretty good at measuring it out, but every so often, you kind of need to audit yourself and kind of see, am I still doing the right portion or am I starting to go over? Because that starts to happen. It's normal. Then you just rein it back in. But this isn't changing. Oh, wrong way. Okay. And thinking ahead, like plan what meals and snacks that you want to have. So instead of, you're starving, you go reach in the pantry and grab something, have them ready. Like you can pre-portion what you want to have. And then when you are at that hungry state, there's a bag that's ready to go and you know exactly how much you're getting and you're not even going to have to worry about anything because it's part of your plan for your day. You also want to make sure that you're staying hydrated because it's been long said that people can feel like they're hungry, but they're really just thirsty. Kind of tricks them a little bit. So keep drinking your water. A lot of times, if you're feeling a little bit hungry, but your stomach's not actually growling, you drink some water. Time goes by and you're like, oh, maybe I wasn't actually hungry. And then, you just go to the next meal. It's not going to be that far away. When you're going out to eat, this is where it can be really tricky. Oops, wrong way. When you're going out to eat, the restaurant portions are way too big. Something you can do right away, unless you feel embarrassed to do this, but this is a great strategy. Ask for a to-go container immediately. Take out what you want to bring home and leave on your plate what you want to let yourself have. That's the easiest way to make sure you don't go overboard with what you're eating. Because if it's on your plate, it's so easy to just eat it. If you've already taken it out and you've set it aside and it's not there anymore, you're going to be more inclined to stop when you finish that. And, you're not going to be overly full because you've already set it aside for later. Then you just have to worry about later's leftovers and not overdoing it with that. But that's another thing. let's see. Yeah, and you definitely want to make sure that when you're picking things at restaurants, I'll go into more detail with this, but choose the leaner proteins, look for higher fiber foods, look for like getting, your veggies in there, and just try to really slow down and listen to your body as you're eating. Some mindful eating when you're going out. Try not to get wrapped up in everybody snacking on appetizers and then getting, a huge dinner, eating all that, and then dessert. And then you're like stuffed and you're kicking yourself because you ate too much. Okay, so this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. How to structure your plate. So this is how you can think about your plate and keep it super simple. Have like half your plate of veggies. This could be salad. This could be a combination of like broccoli and cauliflower. This could be like any kind of combo of veggies that you want, but have it take up most of your plate, about half. Then have your portion of a leaner protein. That's probably like anywhere between 4 to 6 ounces right there, so that you're getting a decent amount of protein with your meal. And then you have the little section for your carb or starchy type of, vegetables are carbs, so don't forget that. But I mean more of your starches like your rice, your pasta, your quinoa, the rice and grains and things like that. That's where that can go. Or things like potatoes or corn. Use that little space for that section. Then you can incorporate healthy fats kind of into it. So if you were having, let's think of a meal. Let's say you're having steak with some rice and some veggies. Like you could have a salad. This is like a fajita type of thing. The healthy fats, you can have some avocados in there. You could even just count the stir fry veggies that they do for that, like the fajita veggies. Those are usually in a lot of oil if you got them at a restaurant. So I would count that towards the fats versus adding anything else extra, because it's going to add up pretty quick. Another example, if you have your carb starch as corn, you could put a little bit of butter on there if you like butter on your corn. Or maybe you're thinking about your salad dressing, because the olive oil in your dressing on your veggies, that's incorporating some healthy fats. But if you structure your plate like this and make sure your plate isn't a humongous plate, you're going to be pretty well balanced with your meals. But we get into trouble when the carb starch part starts to take over like more like 3/4 of the plate instead of this like, little sliver over here. That's when people start getting into trouble. But that's super simple way to just kind of break down your plate. Now, I'm going to give you some different ways that you can kind of guide yourself with portion control without, putting it on a scale. So say you're out and you're trying to kind of gauge what you have, or you're at home and you don't have a scale yet and you're kind of trying to figure this out. You can use different parts of your hand to figure this out. So your palm, not the fingers, just the palm itself. If it's about that size, come over to the camera. That's going to be probably about 3 ounces. Now, if you have a humongous hand, it's probably going to be more than that, obviously. But it's a rough guide, so you can kind of guess like, okay, that's about 3 ounce serving. I have a small hand. Mine's definitely going to be more like 3 ounces. Larger hand, I think maybe 4.5 to 5, depending on how big your hand is. If you're a basketball player, you probably got 5 or 6 ounces right there. But I'm talking about just, general people hands. Okay, then we've got your fist. So if you look at your fist, that's about a cup size. This is great for your veggies. You can have like 2 of these on your plate, and that's going to really fill you up. Or if you're doing, you can see the 2 cupped hands. That's going to be like 2 cups worth of veggies. So you could think about your salad greens, 2 like handfuls, putting them on your plate. A small single cupped hand is like a half of a cup serving size. This is closer to what you want your rice and your pasta to fit in. Most restaurants you go out to, it is not your hand cupped like that. That's your portion size. It's more like 2 handfuls. So you're getting more like 4 cups or more sometimes of the pasta. So just be mindful with that. Then you've also got like the parts on your fingers. So you have your tip of your thumb from the little joint up. That's like a tablespoon size. If you want to think about a teaspoon size, it's like your finger to the joint up is like a teaspoon. Teaspoon is very tiny. And then you can also think about your whole thumb, like the two joint up, as like a 2 tablespoon. That gets a little tricky. I don't really like that one for peanut butter and things because people will lie to themselves and think that that's only 2 tablespoons of peanut butter when really they're really pushing a lot more. But when you're thinking about maybe oils or um, butter and things, you could probably use more like your thumb size for like butter. It's easier to see. But those are a couple of different ways of estimating portion sizes with just your hand. And then there's some other ways you can compare them to like a deck of cards. That's another one for your protein source. A lot of times that's good for chicken, turkey, beef. The hockey puck is like the size of a standard burger patty, about 4 ounces. Then you have the little shot glass, which is usually like a little over an ounce, but that's a pretty decent size for your salad dressing. So you can think about that. And then we've got the 2 different types of balls. We got the tennis ball, which they estimate to be kind of like a serving of like 1 cup full of grains or pasta. That one's a little hard to reference. I like the hand better for that. So I feel like people will definitely overdo it if they think about that. But same, the baseball they have saying, more like a regular size apple or orange or something. And then another one that I'm not really that keen on, which is a ping pong ball being like a tablespoon of peanut butter. I swear it's the peanut butter that gets people in trouble. So maybe don't reference that. The simplest thing to do with peanut butter to make sure that you're not overdoing it is to put the peanut butter jar on the scale, hit the 0 button, and scoop out what you want. And you will see on the scale, it will show you like -12 grams. And then you'll know that you have 12 grams of peanut butter on your spoon. You can look at the serving size of the peanut butter. I don't have any peanut butter in my kitchen right now. See what serving size you want to have. Do you want it to be, the 100 calories? You want it to be 200 calories? You want it to be 50 calories? You can get the grams when you scoop it out, and you can know exactly what you're having and not guesstimating. Because I guesstimating on fats is going to be one of the ways that you can see that maybe you're not having good weight loss and you're kind of overdoing it on the fats. You're not getting a high volume of food, but you're actually getting a lot of calories for that little amount. And it's just so much better to be more accurate with using a scale for those types of things. Peanut butter being number one, and any of the other nut butters as well. They're just so easy to over. So easy. Now, if you have one of those pre-packaged, like 2 tablespoon serving size ones, you don't really need to worry about that. But environmentally friendly, not the greatest. And just don't overdo it on the peanut butter. It will stall your weight loss. And let's move on. Okay, so a little bit more about eating out. Like I said before, you can ask to have, your box before you start eating so you can portion it out right away and tuck it to the side and then not have to worry about it. Another thing that I really like is making sure that you look up the menu before you go. Not only does that alleviate any stress, but I see this all the time. It's like almost like a decision fatigue when there's too many choices. You have everybody around you and you just go, oh, I'm just going to do that because that's what someone else is doing. I can't even navigate through everything. I'll just get that. And then you end up kicking yourself later because you're like, why didn't I make a healthier choice for that? If I would have taken a couple minutes just to look at the menu, I would have been able to plan out something that would have better fit with my goals. Look at the menu ahead of time, get a good idea of what you want to get. And I always say this, have more than one option, because I don't know how many times I've gone to a restaurant and I was so excited to get something, and then they tell me they're out of that, or that's no longer on the menu, but they didn't update it online. And then you are like, okay, well, crap, what do I pick? And you make a rash decision because everyone else has ordered and you're like, oh, what do I pick? Have a couple options in mind. So if one fails, you have another go to. And I'm going to have another video talking about how to navigate restaurant menus to help you pick some healthier choices just by reading through, and you can get a good idea of how they're prepared and what's going to help you in weight loss. And then another good tip would to be split your entrees with somebody, because the portions they give you are way too large. It is crazy. At Cheesecake Factory, the cheesecake itself, like a slice of cheesecake, some of them can be 1,400 calories. That's like a small person's whole day of calories when they're in weight loss. That's crazy. Even if you cut that cheesecake in half, you're still getting 700 calories if you split that with somebody. That's a little better, but it's there. It just blows my mind, some of the calorie counts on the foods that you have when you go out to eat. I would say a lot of times when you go out to eat, it's going to be 2, 3, maybe even 4 times as many calories as if you made it at home, just because they put some extra love in there with the butter and, creams and all sorts of heavy fat things that added up really fast. So definitely look ahead of time, split an entree with people, or portion your meal right away so you're not eating all of it and you're not even feeling like you're going to eat all of it. Maybe ask them not to bring bread to the table, because the bread can be a big filler and then you didn't actually expect to eat that, and then you eat your dinner too, and then you overdid it. That's up to you though. If you want to incorporate the bread into it, go for it. But if you are going out and you don't really care about the bread and it's kind of taken away from the meal that you're supposed to have, then scrap the bread. Don't have them not bring it, or the chips and salsa that they bring to the table. If you want to plan to have the chips and the salsa, go for it. But if you'd rather enjoy your entree and chips and salsa are just going to be fillers for you, then ask them not to bring it. You don't have to have it. And if you have that guilty conscience about wasting food, then ask them not to bring it. It's that simple. If they mess up and bring it, then you just push to the side and then deal with it after. Or ask for a box and put it in a box and give it to somebody else. And then this is another thing just to note. The menus and the nutrition information online are not always the most accurate. So different chefs could be cooking one day. They could be adding a little bit more. Maybe a chef's adding a little bit less. Maybe the portion that actually makes it to you is more than what the restaurant's standard portion should be. They're not extremely accurate. So I always buffer some extra calories in there when you go out to eat, especially if you like looked ahead and you're like, okay, I can do this, 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 and it should be around this many calories. I would add more to it, maybe 100 extra, maybe 200 extra, depending on what you actually got. Because if you want to make sure that you're staying in that calorie deficit, you give yourself that buffer. It's going to be helpful. You can always eat some low calorie things at home if you end up being still hungry. And then with portioning, the challenges are mostly with the emotional eating aspect, when you just end up finding yourself in your pantry eating because you're trying to you're ending your day, you're trying to calm, or it's time to watch TV and you just are trying to get decompressed. You can find people ending up eating too much at that point. That's a whole other thing, and I'll do a whole video on that in another segment. Being around friends and the society's pressures to drink and all that can start to lead your portions awry. Sometimes when people have just that one drink, they stop paying attention to the rest of what they're eating, and they end up eating a lot more than what they wanted to do. Have your plan. One strategy that a lot of people will use is they'll just tell their friends, like, doctor's got me on a medication, I can't drink with it. End of story. Like that usually quiets people down. Like, they're not going to push you because it's a medical thing. If you just say, I'm trying not to drink, or like, I don't know, people are pushers. So watch the pressure, but you control what you put on your plate and you control what you put in your mouth. So just do your best and try not to let other people push you into other things. And then just cravings in general. I feel like some of these cravings start to disappear the more you take away the sugary foods, but there's still ways to incorporate sugary, fun foods and have your portions. You just have to gauge what's good for you. I know I have like no self control when I start eating a lot of sweets. So I just try not to have them so much because it just leads me to want more and more. You got to figure out what works good for you. And if things lead you to crave more, maybe they're not the best thing for you to have. Every time I try to have like dark chocolate chips in the cabinet, and I'm going to be like, okay, I'll just have a little bit and I'll have it every night and it'll be my little thing. I can't. As soon as I start having them, I just end up eating the bag way too fast. And I just know myself. And I don't think that's ever really going to change. So you have to set yourself up for success. If you know something doesn't work for you, don't do it. But once you get portion control down and you start using those smaller plates and just really being mindful with what you're putting on your plate, this is a sustainable approach. You're going to start to recognize what you can eat for yourself to keep your weight either stable or in weight loss, and you're going to feel comfortable with it. And it's not going to be that much of a difference between your weight loss eating and your maintenance eating. It's really going to be like, oh, I can have an extra meal or two that will take you from weight loss to your regular way of eating. Portioning and just controlling the calories like that. So it's freeing because you can literally have anything that you want, but you just have to watch how much you have and be mindful. Keeping a food journal, and I highly suggest apps to track your portioning, is going to be really helpful because you can literally see exactly what you're having, especially if you're weighing your food out. It's not exactly accurate when you're doing the restaurant foods, but you can do your best and add a little buffer. Don't pick the lower calorie one out of the choices. Like if it's like a grilled chicken sandwich, don't pick the lowest calorie one and lie to yourself. Like pick a middle ground, maybe a higher one, just to give yourself the room to make sure that you're still hitting a deficit, because you don't truly know exactly what's going into it. But both with my one-on-one coaching, my one-on-one coaching, I use a program that has great meal tracking, but there's a ton of other apps out there. There's MyFitnessPal, there's like Lose It, Fitbit has their own meal tracking, Samsung's Active thing has their own meal tracking. There's so many apps out there that can help you keep track of what you're actually eating. But a scale is going to be the most accurate, and weighing in grams is going to give you the most accurate information. Let's see. Yeah. So portioning is just, watching what you're having, being mindful, trying not to overdo it. You'll learn along the way. And I tell people, like, the journaling and the weighing, that's not forever. And I do really think that you should audit yourself later on down the line. But you're really taking a few weeks, maybe a couple months, it depends on how quick of a learner you are, to kind of really pay attention to what a serving size looks to you and kind of adjusting to the smaller portions. And then you probably don't even need to use the scale, and you maybe not even need to log your food anymore if you start to get it down and you kind of are like, oh, I get it. This is kind of what I should eat, and this is kind of what works for me. It's not forever, but I do every so often will check myself and I'll be like, okay, I need to get back to tracking because I feel like I'm overdoing it a little bit, or weight starting to creep up a little bit. Then I'll get back to tracking and just like audit myself for a short time frame, and then I can go again without having to worry about tracking and measuring and all that. But it's good to do in the beginning. Don't get obsessed with it. It's not forever. You're just learning. All right. I will see you in the next video.